1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
The United Nations is our one great hope for a peaceful and free world. Ralph J. Bunche, renowned political scientist. The UN, since its inception in 1945, has striven to maintain peace throughout the world. It's a collection of most of the nations of the world and acts as a worldwide governing body. They protect the peace when things get too hostile in any country and link the nations of the world in an alliance. The UN was born out of a necessity to protect the peace, and throughout its history has had its fair share of successes and failures. The United Nations is an organization that was born out of the ashes of World War II. According to WarChronicle.com, there were almost 20 million military deaths during the war, nearly 50 million when civilian deaths are included. This carnage took place only 21 years after nearly 10 million were killed during World War I. After the First World War, the League of Nations, precursor to the United Nations, was established, but was ineffective and disbanded after the failure to prevent the Second World War. All these deaths, the failure of the League of Nations, and the development of more and more deadly weapons was the necessity for an effective worldwide peacekeeping body became readily apparent, and from this, the UN was born. According to the United Nations website, the name United Nations was first coined by Franklin D. Roosevelt in the Declaration by United Nations on January 1st, 1942, when the Allied powers vowed to fight against the Axis powers during World War II. The United Nations began its journey towards becoming a real peacekeeping body in 1945, when 50 countries met in San Francisco to draw up the United Nations Charter. The Charter was signed by the 50 countries on June 26, 1945, and became an official body on October 24th of the same year. After becoming official, the fledgling UN set out into the uncharted territory of maintaining world peace. It is structured in the form of a Security Council comprised of the United States, China, France, the Soviet Union, and the United Kingdom, all of whom have veto power, and a General Assembly comprised of the other nations of the world. The first General Assembly of the UN came on January 17, 1946, in London, England, and the first resolution was passed on January 24, 1946. That first resolution focused on the elimination of nuclear warheads and other such weapons of mass destruction. From there, the UN had some great successes. Some of the more notable ones would be the establishment of UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, and raising money and coordinating relief efforts in places such as Haiti, where the UN has raised over $400 million in relief effort. However, the UN is responsible for far more than just relief efforts in UNICEF. The General Assembly, over the course of the United Nations history, has approved 54 different peacekeeping missions in nations across the globe. In addition to that, the UN has negotiated many peaceful ends to violent conflicts, such as the Iraq-Iran War and the withdrawal of Soviet troops from Afghanistan in the 1980s. The United Nations also played an integral role in the ending of apartheid in South Africa in 1994 and has protected children in war zones by establishing such things as days of tranquility, where children are provided with food, water, vaccines, and other necessities that they do not have access to in war zones. All of those landmines that were placed on the ground during wars and never stepped on, the United Nations leads efforts to remove all of the unexploded landmines in places like Afghanistan, Somalia, and Rwanda. So while the United Nations does pass laws that strive for peace, it does not leave the enforcement of laws to the others, but is hands-on in the places that most need its help. Those efforts are noble, but the UN also has its fair share of flaws. Despite its best efforts, the United Nations is still a bureaucracy that struggles to pass effective measures quickly, and also struggles to pass measures that all of its nations can agree upon. For instance, there's much information about the current situation in the Darfur and the Sudan, and many people would agree that it is a genocide occurring, but the UN has taken no action yet. That is because the Security Council has veto power, so if one says no, the bill is vetoed, and it is incredibly difficult to get all five to agree on one thing. Much in the same way the United States government cannot make decisions quickly due to differing wants and desires of its constituents, the United Nations cannot make decisions quickly due to the exact same thing, just on a global scale. Passing legislation or approving the sending of troops to a country is difficult because it needs to be approved by a majority, and not all nations have similar agendas, which makes some argue that the UN is ineffectual. Though it does have its flaws, the United Nations has succeeded in preventing a third world war and has provided aid to the needy and negotiated peace among warring nations. No organization is without its flaws, but the United Nations has done its best to achieve its original goal, maintaining world peace.